Hey guys, so number five of product hackers, which is great. Sav and I started this, I think at the midway through lockdown number one. We were kind of like, well, how do we get this idea of meetups going when we can't actually meet up in person? And we thought, why the hell stop? Why not move over to Zoom? And yeah, I mean, so far every week the number of attendees are going up. People are coming back. I think in terms of what it looks like as a community driven product management meetup, it's looking to grow, and we're getting strong speakers every week, and that's the same with this week. Brought to you by All Squares and Product Box. All Squares, myself, Danny, and Julian, we're working with product companies in the technology space here in Melbourne. Yeah, I mean, come reach out, allsquares.com.au, have a chat. But yeah, let's kick this off. Sav, over to you.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, so this is number five for us, and I think it's been going pretty well. The feedback that I've had has been good, and it's quite a simple thing that we're doing in that we just want people to learn from each other. It's probably one of the most effective ways to learn. And sometimes if you don't block out that hour of your time every fortnight, you don't get around to it. And I find that it's a really good discipline thing, particularly for me and Sammy. And an hour a week, an hour every fortnight, we're organising some great people to speak to and share their stories, and we learn from those, and then we utilize those skills and the experience that we've got from those people in our daily jobs. I know I certainly do. So we're going to continue to do this, and hopefully it'll help people during lockdown as well, just to have something to do on a Friday afternoon that gives them a bit of knowledge and some good learnings. Today we've got Glenn and Daniela, who are joining us to speak about something that, a topic I love actually, and it's about taking something from idea to launch, and it's really difficult because I think that if you've ever tried this, there's so many different ways to do it. Like you can build it and then you can learn, but often like when you build it and then no one comes and you don't have enough data, then what are you actually learning? So I'm not sure. Like if you build it, make sure you've got some marketing budget to at least drive people to the site, so you're learning something from a statistically significant population. You can learn, so you can probably go and speak to your customers and learn quite a bit, and then you can build it, which you might be more successful with. But a lot of people speak to customers and then they get stuck in a bit of a analysis paralysis sort of situation, or they begin to really doubt what they're starting to do, and that can be difficult as well. And then you've got like, research, and I've seen this so many times, probably in larger corporates, you see this, is like doing so much research that it takes like 9 months to even get out of discovery, and that is probably not optimal either. And then there's some people that do it really well through a bit of quant, so building and testing maybe a landing page and a bit of qualitative interviews and with customers and things like that, and sort of bringing the two together to try and forge the pathway. I really think it's a really interesting topic. I personally read a lot about, and I'm sure you guys have come across this, something called working backwards, which is what Amazon uses, and like they sort of draft this press release, and that press release, just the process of actually drafting that press release really helps you tease out your idea a little bit more, and who your customers are and what problems you're solving, and what does success look like when it's, when it's published in market in the newspaper, and it sort of brings it to life. So there's various methods that you can do this. I'm really excited to hear from both Glenn and Daniela. Glenn's going to kick us off. Glenn's got some great he's got some great experience. I know I was looking at your LinkedIn, Glenn, and I noticed you'd worked for MedAdvisor, and MedAdvisor, great company, great Australian company. One of my friends was working there as well. He's currently at the Arq Group as a associate director of health, and he's going to speak to us about a term which everyone usually talks about, but maybe not very many people actually know what it is, which is the term MVP, and it being an art versus science. So we'll start with you, mate. And for anyone who's got questions, please feel free to pop them into the Q&A or chat, and yeah, we'll definitely get to those questions.
Thank you, Sav and Sammy, for having me here, and thanks for the introduction. I guess just talking to Sav there brings back a lot of memories about the length of time that something like an ideation to launch can go through. And I guess if this is the 5th product hackers episode, you could probably spend another 10 at least on the different bits of the ideation to launch journey. I've taken the MVP because for me, I think it can be misunderstood. And I'm going to try and give you some of my learnings. This is definitely not a textbook education in the MVP. There are plenty of books for you to go out there and search for to get that. This is reflections on my journey, and hopefully you can take something away from that. Just trying to change. Oh. So first of all, I'll be setting the scene. I'll be then trying to give you some idea about what the MVP means, and then I'll go through a summary and close. First of all, when I think about an MVP, I think it's about innovation. It's about, you're trying to do something to get somewhere, and I think that's what innovation is about, and that requires buy-in. And that buy-in and the way you go about that comes in all different forms, and I think the science in the MVP is in the books, but the art is how you navigate the variability in what you're dealing with, and it's certainly not someone just stand up there, teaching someone about an MVP. It's really taking stock of the environment that you're in, and then being able to adapt that MVP and that approach accordingly to all the stakeholders involved. And this is going to be a theme throughout my presentation. There's no silver bullet for this. You're going to have to learn it. Again, it's a journey. You've got to know what you're aiming for, and start creating the shared understanding about the aim of the MVP. So I'll have to just minimize that. I've got a bit of a rough scale here around from discovery to beyond. Okay, and the MVP can be used in all different ways. Is it a viable product? I'd argue that an MVP, if I'm thinking of an MVP, I'm thinking of a go-to-market plan. As far as the viability of what I'm doing, I try to find that out through a discovery, a prototyping phase, where I know that it's actually feasible, that this is going to hit the mark. And then with the MVP, it's more of a go-to-market strategy and about value realization. Again, no silver bullet. And always think delivery. So think about what problems you're solving and solve the most important ones first. Don't try and build from the ground up. You're going to have people that think that an MVP, it means that you're going to do this quickly, and in some ways that's what it's about. So you have to think about how can I solve an end-to-end problem, and it might be problems in plural, but you've got to think, how do I do this? And how do I do it that's tangible to a user benefit that solves a problem? Now, the variabilities here that I'll call out is how much of this slice that you're going to peel off this MVP will be dependent on the organisation maturity and their current sort of existing reputation. So, for example, a startup might not have any reputation, so they've got nothing to lose. So the size and the way they go about their MVP might be a lot different to a large enterprise, which might have market forces at play, enterprise stakeholders, they might have shareholders, and so their risk, they're going to be risk adverse to the way the MVP looks. So your MVP might be a lot bigger in that scenario to where a startup might be. Also, is your product B2B, B2C? Is it an app on an app store? So all these things with the various stakeholders involved will change the size of that slice. So let's go into what it might mean. So minimal is really, we're talking about time and function. So when I think about an MVP, and in this stage, I think about doing the right amount of the right thing at the right time. So you don't do all of one thing, you've got to do the right amount at the right time. And that's, again, objective focus over functional items. It's always an easier discussion talking about the objective being to solve this problem rather than, it's going to take, 10, functional items to solve the problem, because there will always be disagreements over what it takes to solve the problem when it comes to functions. Whereas if you can agree on the objective, it makes all the conversations easier. Again, there always has to be a consideration that time and scope come together and there's trade-offs. No silver bullet here either. Is it viable or is it valuable? So as I mentioned earlier, I think it's more value here rather than viable, but I mean, everyone, again, will take their own opinion out of that. So you've got to direct all your MVP conversations on what key problems are being solved rather than the functional items, as I've mentioned. Validate the MVP through consistent user testing throughout the whole stage. So whether it's a design, you can test a design, you can test assumptions. The easiest conversation that you're ever going to have with any stakeholder about what's in your MVP is when you've tested with the user and they've told you, yes, they need it, no, they don't, because they'll do both, and that will change the size of the MVP. And if you can take your opinion out of it and say it's the users, the user testing, the user research, that's always going to help you throughout the MVP journey. And in fact, I think that's the most important thing. If you don't do anything else, just test with your users. So the product's got to be usable and it's got to have a viable business model behind it. And I think what that MVP really is doing is it's showing the value of that business model. You want to get it to market quicker. You want to be able to start generating revenue for it. So, but the usability is about ease of use plus its ability to solve the problem. So it's no good solving the problem if people can't work through the product properly as well. And you've got to include customer satisfaction in everything that you do. So in summary, the MVP focusing on innovation requires buy-in. So that's really about the teamwork that you're going to have to generate that drive for the MVP approach. It's a journey and it's dependent on organisation maturity. Think value. So what is the most valuable product that we can get to the users in the least amount of time? And think delivery. So solve the problem end to end and think about the right amount of the right thing at the right time. So when I think about all these things together, and it's a bit of a left field take, but minimal viable product could be a measure value proficiently. So an MVP is about value, and the easiest, most proficient way to bring about a way to measure whether how much value there will be. Again, there's no silver bullet, and you all come up with your own ways to do this and your own variations. So my key takeaway is that the team element of what it's going to take with the MVP, it's about buying, it's about generating innovation, and again, there's no silver bullet. Thank you for listening and joining us today.
Thanks, mate. I really like that. Measure value proficiently. Noted it down. That's really good.
Hopefully it makes sense. It makes sense to me.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it certainly does. I mean, I feel as though, like, you know, that's one of the reasons that you're putting something out there, right? To understand whether it's valuable to someone in a, you know, short period of time or with limited scope. I like your point around enterprises versus some of the startups. Do you think, in your opinion, do you think MVP works once you're, say, like a large bank? Like, you know, you often have these like risk and regulatory sort of costs that and impacts that you can have, and so sometimes it makes it super difficult to actually use that approach. I'm not saying it's impossible, but in your experience, what have you found?
Well, I've found people, say if I'm, you know, a large enterprise, they'd like to think that they're agile, and often they are as much as they can be. And people want to talk, you know, what are we doing? How are we developing? Are we using an MVP? So you'll probably come across a lot of stakeholders that want to hear that you're operating in this way.
Yeah.
And I guess this is my key point, is that don't be too dogmatic about an MVP. If you've worked for a startup, you know, an MVP can be completely different. And I think don't be too dogmatic. You know, you can still operate in a lean type fashion that can include some kind of minimal aspect to what you're producing, but it's going to be different in that situation.
Yeah, 100%. I think it is. That's the thing. It is going to be hugely different. You can't expect, you know, one organization to be similar to the other. So
yeah, it might mean you instead of a 12-month
yeah.
release, it might be 6 or 8 months
Yeah.
at a bank. You know, whereas, you know, in a startup, it might be 6 weeks.
Yeah, that's right. I think I said it at the last one as well. I listened to this podcast from, and Brian Chesky was on it from Airbnb, and he was just talking about how he loved the days where, like, if you want to release something, like someone would quote him up and say, like, you know, I want to release this, and they'd be like, that's going to cost you approximately $5,000, and he'd be like, yeah, let's do it. Yeah. And like now Airbnb is so old, and he's like, everything costs like $1 million.
Yeah.
Like, you want to do one thing, and they're like, it's $1 million because you got risk, you got regs, you got this, and it's just sometimes the size of it's a result of scaling so big, I suppose.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for that, mate. We'll have more questions at the end. I will now pass on to Daniela. You can unmute yourself. And Daniela's got a really great background. She worked for BT, Sony PlayStation, and now she is the product lead at S Money. I believe she is also English, and she'll be speaking to us today about trading the line between safe and stupid, which sounds really interesting. Over to you.
Thank you. So yes, my topic is about treading the line between safe and stupid. I'm going to cover a lot of a similar kind of perspective, Glenn. I'm going to say there's no silver bullet, and that's exactly what treading the line is about. It's about balancing, which is one of the things product managers do best. So that's what I'm going to talk about. Yes, you're right, Sav. I have worked Sony PlayStation. Before that, I've worked at British Telecoms, which is the biggest telecoms in the UK. I worked at Empower, which is one of the biggest energy companies in the UK. And I'm currently at a small startup called S-Money in foreign currency. So very, very different worlds. So yeah, I want to talk to you about treading the line between safe and stupid. And to do that, I first need to tell you what I mean by safe and how we've kind of all come across safe, and what we mean by stupid and how we've probably all been stupid at times. And then I'm going to give you my top 4 tips about how to try and stay in between those lines in the zone of, you know, smart. So first of all, I want to talk about what it means to be safe. So we have probably all got experience in the safe zone at one time or another in our career. Certainly when we start, we're very nervous, we don't really have the confidence, and we can often end up in the safe zone. It can happen again. It certainly did for me when I jumped to a completely new industry, a completely new way of working. And I kind of started going, oh, crap, what am I doing? And started veering into the safe zone and had to pull myself back out again. It can happen if you have a complex product. So, you know, there's often times where we will start edging towards safe and we just need to bring ourselves back. And this is a big problem in big companies because there's a lot of pressure. Like we talked about, you know, there's market forces at play, there's, you know, shareholders, there's a lot of layers of management. Everybody wants their opinion. And annoyingly in big businesses, it's a very old school and slowly changing kind of culture of moving away from this is the solution I want to this is the problem that, you know, we have requirements around. So it's trying not to fall into that trap, being the you say I do person. I think I read a book somewhere where someone called it, I think Melissa Perry calls it the waiter complex, where you get so kind of worried about making a decision or doing something wrong that you end up just taking requirements and delivering exactly what they say and kind of not taking any responsibility and not focusing on the customer. Safe is a real problem because we think we're avoiding risk and avoiding uncertainty and we're focusing on the day-to-day and what we can achieve. But this is actually really risky because we're not pushing our products forward. We're not pushing our business forward. We're basically making marginal gains, and you know it's likely that our competitors will overtake us. So it's not a place we want to stay in. So thinking about the other side of that, when we're being stupid, again, I'm sure we all have examples in our career when we've been stupid, and it's really hard not to do. I know Glenn mentioned in his presentation about the importance of taking your opinion out of it. And that is a real skill we have as product managers, or that we have to at least learn in product management, which is to not kind of bring the ego with you. It's really hard to separate your self-identity and what you're delivering. It's really hard because you've got goals, you have a vision, you're listening to the problems that the customers are telling you every day. You want to solve them. You want to be ambitious. You know, some of us want to be the next Steve Jobs. So it's really difficult to not get carried away with that. And, you know, there's a lot of behavioral science that makes us want to do that product managers have to steer away from, which is, you know, having all the data in the world, but being blind to it because we so want our product to work, the solution that we have to this problem to work, that we make excuses for our data, why it doesn't meet what we said it would be. You know, we didn't do that study correctly, we didn't ask enough people, etc., because it doesn't tell us what we want to hear. So we need to be really careful with the stupid, that we check in on ourselves regularly, and I'll talk about in a minute some tips for that. But most importantly, stupid creates unnecessary risk and anxiety and high stakes. You know, if we sit in the safe zone, we're going to fall behind. But if we're in the stupid zone, especially in a really small business, you know, you don't have the resources and money that you have in a huge enterprise to handle the fallout of that failure or risk that you've taken. So, you know, say if we fall behind, stupid, we can fall apart. So I'm now going to tell you my 4 tips about how to tread this line and stay in the middle of all of this. Again, no silver bullet, just learnings. And I'm going to do this with the help of some pictures of my new puppy, because he has been helping me get through lockdown, and is just more interesting than a stock image. So, number 1, think big, step small. So what I mean by this is there's no reason why you can't be ambitious. Think big, you know, think on the air of stupid. You know, there's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't think about all the value and benefits that we can bring to our customers. But it doesn't mean that we can, you know, what we should be doing is shoehorn all of that value in and extend the length of that MVP or deliver something crappy because we're trying to do too much. It's all about taking small incremental steps to the big. A prime example of this for me was when I actually started at Sony PlayStation. I basically have, you know, it's my biggest kind of rising from the, you know, rising up the ranks kind of moment of, I joined and I was given the responsibility of the PlayStation Partners Experience, which is the game creators, the developers and the publishers who, you know, make and publish those games onto the PlayStation Store, their experience. And one of my products was user management. And so I got in the job and I started working out what we were going to deliver with the teams and, you know, the product managers I was managing. And it was all so exciting. And, you know, 2 months in, we had our first deliverable, and it was so exciting, right? Not to the senior stakeholders, it turns out, because they basically laughed at me. And it was really challenging because all I had delivered in their eyes was a global header. The very first delivery was basically the fact that we had, you know, 20 plus applications and tools that all of these, you know, partners and their users were having to navigate to get their game out. And all I had delivered was this header that sat across all of them, a menu. And they were like, I can't believe this is what got prioritized. You know, we were going to have this big user management you know, product. We were going to have unlocked all the value of empowering our partners to use their to use the tools that we have without having to deal with our admin. And, you know, I had to deal with that initial laughter and say, look, it's coming and this is going to be big. But, you know, trust started to be gained because as soon as I delivered that global header and all the tech that went underneath to knit all those applications together, I was able to deliver the user profile that sat globally in the header. I was able to send out notifications to let them know new features like SSO was coming and actually deliver SSO. You know, we were then able to deliver admin functions, language functions, all these different things, news feeds that were able to happen because of the tech and the ability to display that through the header. This was strategic. All of this was coming and the different parts were prioritized along the way. But, you know, and soon the laughter stopped and everyone was very, you know, very happy about the outcome. But it just, you know, it's a very different mindset for a big business. Pack your parachute is number 2. So this is very much about if you're not going to be safe, you will be taking risks, but mitigate those risks. You know, there's no reason why you have to be stupid about them. One of the things I always do with my teams is think about the risks of what we're launching. And thinking about what risks there are in terms of likelihood of them happening and also in terms of severity, you know, what will happen if this risk comes to light. So, you know, one of the examples I have for this is when we were working on the PS5 features for our partners. You know, they needed to have access to all of the resources to be able to build great games for the new PS5 2-3 years ago. Before, you know, the console came out, so that there was games to play on it, which is coming out, you know, this year. So with that in mind, we had to be really risk adverse to a certain extent with what we were delivering because nobody was supposed to know about the PS5. This is 2-3 years ago, right? Most of our partners were not allowed to know about this because of risk of leaking the information. Internally, most of the people I worked with, you know, most people in the business didn't know. Everyone was under really strict NDAs. And we had to release the functionality to allow our partners to use the resources to build games on it, but not tell anyone else. And the risk of exposure was really severe. So I had to make sure that in that launch that we built a fallback plan. We built the ability to instantly roll back. Now, in general, I wouldn't do that because the risk wouldn't have that much impact, but in this instant it did. So we had to do that. And I had to make sure I thought about that beforehand, because it would have stopped us completely in our tracks and even delayed the ability for our partners to make games and even the launch, right? So these are things to think about. Other things are in terms of how to land softly. So think about how you can mitigate the risk at launch. I made sure that we did a batch plan. So we launched to the lowest risk, low complexity partners first, and then scaled up to the high risk partners, like EA Games, who have global presence and users all over the world, and half of them aren't allowed to know about this product. So, think about that in the way that you deliver. 3, be an amateur scientist. So I really want to talk about the amateur here. We all know the value of data and how imperative it is in our career to be data driven, how to remove the ego and, the headstrong attitude by being objective. But what a lot of, I see anyway in big businesses, what a lot of people do is in product is they leave that to the experts. They think, oh, I'm not the scientist or expert in that area, but I have a whole raft of user research people that are working with me, or UX teams that are working with me. They are the experts in that field, they'll do it. But I want to let you know that, that's not true. Yes, they're absolutely experts, but it's not true that you don't need to get in front of your customers. It's imperative that you do. We need to understand deeply the problem space of our customers to be able to consider the right solutions. It's really important to see how our customers, use our products and what the problems they have day to day. Example of this is when I was working at Empower or when I was working at BT, I made sure that I, took opportunities like going out with the engineers whilst they installed some of our new products or were fixing problems, to be in the homes of those customers, asking them questions, understanding their issues. I did the same in terms of the sales team. So I would go out sometimes and, shadow and assist with sales events, or where they would go and, flyer at the shopping centre with a deal on for, broadband or whatever. Because I wanted to know what was enticing customers in, what was interesting them, what their problems were. It's a real great FaceTime. I want to be very clear though, that this kind of user research or, investigation does not replace the important work that is done from, heat mapping, analytics, usability studies, all of those good things. This is just another thing you really need to have, another feather in your cap that you really should have. Yeah, be an amateur scientist. So 4th and final is be a fearless team. So this is, about culture and mindset. It's one of the hardest things I find to change, especially in really large businesses. But it's so important. I see a lot of times with product managers that they think, what is my job if I'm not, the source of this information, if I'm not the expert? They kind of sometimes hoard knowledge and feel like they're a middleman of sorts. Like they go out to the users, they work with UX and user research, and they take that information and they, impart it with the stakeholders and with the development team. And that's their, that's how they keep the control of their job. No, not at all. Really, really important to bring your team along with you. Get those stakeholders in front of users. Get your development team if possible, or at least 1 or 2 in front of users. If everybody really deeply understands that problem space, the solutions you're going to come up with, the ideation that's going to happen, the prioritization that's going to happen is going to be so much richer. There'll be so much more innovation. And, I think Glenn mentioned this again about innovation needs buy-in, right? You're not going to get buy-in if you come up with a stupid idea without data, or you stay safe and you have, marginal gains. You need to bring everybody along on this journey. And most importantly, it is risk management. We don't need to, as product managers, hold all of this on our shoulders ourselves. We're taking the risk, we're making the decisions. We can absorb it as a team, share that risk, all get behind, the same agenda. So those are my 4 top tips about how to tread this line and stay in between safe and stupid. And finally, I just really want to call out that, there is no silver bullet, right? This is a balancing act. We learn this with time. I don't care where you are in your career as a product manager, you're always learning. And I think, things like this type of meetup, so thanks, Sav and Sammy for having me. This type of meetup is really good to help us as a community of product managers learn how to make this journey to smart. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. That was really, really awesome. I have a question. I have many questions. I'll ask you one of them.
Sure.
You talked about risk management.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's super important. And you talked about, I think you said likelihood and impact and how you assess that usually. Have you used any other sort of techniques like, have you ever done like a pre-mortem or something like that? You know what that is? No. Okay. Like it's something that I've used in the past. I think it's really simple. It's like if me and Sammy were running, when we decided to do product hackers, like, we might look into the future and say, okay, so we're running product hackers. The first meetup has no one registers for. How do we mitigate against that happening? We're like, all right, let's tell 10 of our mates and they'll join the product hackers. And it's sort of like trying to go into the future and instead of doing a post-mortem, like doing a pre-mortem on some of the situations that might happen and then figuring out what you would do to mitigate those. And
I haven't done it in those terms necessarily. I know there's so many like buzzwords and terms and different technologies, right? But I have definitely done that type of thing. So one of the ways we manage to identify the risks and then work out how to mitigate them on that scale is by doing things like we role play and be like, okay, you're that customer, right? And we say, what happens next? What happens next? And what can we do to mitigate it? But you can use like the known unknown matrix as well. Like there's loads of different tools out there. It just depends on what works for the business that you're in. But I would say, try and be careful to steer clear of going too deep, because one of the biggest issues in a big company is that they're so used to mitigating, having project managers and mitigating every risk, and they have long artifacts about it and RAG statuses and all of that, right? They end up kind of worrying about scenarios that aren't going to happen, and it really creates massive bulk for your MVP, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a question for you here, actually, Danny, and it says, how do you deal with team spirit and protecting them from stakeholder noise?
Ooh, good question. Team spirit is really, really important. And it doesn't have to be top down. It doesn't have to be, we'll send out a deck and we'll have a big presentation about the importance of team spirit and do an offsite. It doesn't have to be that. It can be really grassroots. So what I like to do is things like, awards. It's a good way as well for dealing with like failure problems of people being too scared to bring up challenges or failures. So we do, awards. I would have awards for, the biggest insight or the biggest blunder or things like that. It just brings a bit of fun and communication. Quizzes, we do team quizzes. I mean, at one point I did glittery t-shirts for an offsite for my teams so that they all felt like they were part of a bigger team. And do you know what? At first they all said to me, I'm not wearing this. This is so embarrassing. Why would you think this is a good idea? And I was like, okay, fine. And, maybe 5 or 6 people put on the glittery t-shirts. By the end of that event, I had people queuing up and saying, I'm not in your team, but I work with your team. Where's my t-shirts? So sometimes you forget the power of, small things.
Can I?
Yeah, jump in, mate.
I was going to say, yeah, I'm not a big fan of the glittery t-shirt, but I can see how that would lift morale. But the other thing about the team morale is having people, like what Daniela was saying before, have the team be close to the user as well. Have them have this sense of ownership about what's been happening or what's going on and what's going to happen. Like, so don't be descriptive to the team. When you're writing a story, have the developers come up with a lot of the solutions about what's happening. Don't go and have your own ideas. Again, remove your ego and be aware of confirmation bias. So you might understand the big picture and maybe the small key steps, but it's really the team that should drive how it happens. They're the experts in the technology, in the testing, and that. I think that's a really important part.
While we're on that, and this is to both of you, I think Glenn, you're talking about getting close to customers. What are some of the techniques that you guys are using during COVID to get closer to customers? Like, I'm really struggling with this in a couple of instances, and like before you could maybe invite them all to a working group and give them a lunch and like give them some beers and then talk to them about what you're doing, and now like you could send them Uber Eats, I suppose, to their houses and then get them to come on a conference call. But is there some other techniques you guys are using to make sure you're staying connected and your teams are staying connected?
I guess you've got to lead with a hook more now these days. Like, it is difficult, but I don't see it as any different to pre-COVID because, I'm in Melbourne, but I might need to speak to someone in another state or another country. Like there's no difference. I think the only difference now is that you're probably doing it 100% of the time instead of 50%. But those, you just got to put yourself in that situation. You've got to have something tangible. You've got to have thought about your value proposition. I don't think enough work has been put into that value proposition. It's just like, oh, we're going to do X. Well, sell that to me. You've got to sell that. You've got to sell that again and again and again. You've got to sell that to your internal team. You've got to sell that to your executives. You've got to sell that to the market, the users, and you've got to refine it. It doesn't happen overnight. So I think COVID shouldn't change what you're doing too much.
I agree with Glenn in that sense, like working at, especially like in global businesses and so forth, your customers aren't always on your doorstep. So a lot of remote testing is necessary. Working at a really small startup at the moment, you've got to be more scrappy in your approach. You probably don't have those two-way mirror usability testing that you perhaps had at the bigger companies. So, it's thinking about how you can communicate with them. So for example, on the back of a survey, can you get an email or a phone number, have a phone call, have a Zoom meeting with them, send them an Amazon voucher. These are all the kind of techniques you can do. Remote prototype testing, card sorting. There are still loads of online ways to get close to your customers that are really quite cheap actually. So even if it's not COVID, I definitely promote them.
Yeah, completely. I think it is definitely a little bit. It's more different for sure, but I think that I get what you guys are saying in terms of you can connect with them more if it's through Zoom and things like that, and by providing some sort of incentive for them to come along as well, which is a really good idea. Switching a little bit, but still on COVID, and I don't want to keep going on with COVID, but some of the challenges that people face are around remote working. And you guys are working with teams, obviously. What are some of the techniques that you're using or tools in this idea phase, because often in an idea phase, like you need to work with people, and you want people's ideas, and you want to pop those ideas onto some sort of canvas, and you want to be able to talk through them and go back to them and brainstorm and do all these sorts of things. But a lot of people are used to doing that in person and not online. How are you guys handling that at your respective companies? We can start with you, Daniela.
So I was about to say, maybe ask this question to Glenn for the most.
Oh, okay, either or.
I can answer it, but I just mean basically at the moment I've moved to a startup where I work with, it's me and one other person, and we have a development team based in Brisbane anyway. So I don't have kind of the big development team around me that in this new job that, pre-COVID, we were all in the same room. So we've been working like this for a while. And so in our sense, COVID hasn't had an impact for us. But it's more I would say it's more, how we handle it is more frequent communications, really simple tools like Trello, Slack, whatever. But we're making sure that we're talking, I talk to my development team on a daily basis. We do brainstorming, ideation sessions, more kind of, I guess, more summary decks of research that we've done. We'll send that out and then we'll have a chat about it. It's more, online. It's more Zooms and more frequent conversations. You can't have that day that you used to have where you would map out the user journeys and everything together, because one, we can't afford to do that, because every time I talk to the development team, it costs, right? So you just got a bit more savvy with the way that you share information.
Yeah, I think this is the hardest part. It's that real tight collaboration when you're in the same team. And I guess there's a lot of tools, and Daniela just named a lot of them. But there's nothing like having post-it notes and being in the same room and being able to just, talk. And the other thing is being able to see who's not talking, which is not always easy to do on video conference, and then maybe elicit like you've always got the introvert or someone who's shy and not often forward in bringing their often great opinion to the team. So that, I think that's harder on video conference. I don't think I haven't really seen anything that can substitute for that. But there are a lot of great tools. I'm working in a team at the moment. We work in teams, and that's pretty good. There's a lot more video. I think it's feeling the freedom to call someone. You don't have to make an appointment. You just hit them up for a call, and that's just like tapping them on the shoulder in the office. And so I think you've got to give yourself a bit more freedom around, just calling someone. Just call them.
I use a tool called Miro quite a lot, and I only have started actually during maybe a little bit pre-COVID last year. I discovered it, and definitely post-COVID started using it a lot. And it's actually quite amazing. You could almost replicate a in-person scenario using the tool, and I found it's really good. The thing that I also found, Glenn, which is to your point, is about if you're in a room sometimes and you have an introvert, then you can get everyone to do some quiet writing time and then post your ideas. And this tool just doesn't allow it. And I've sort of sent a feature request to them actually to say, like, can you make it so like you can type in your post-it notes, but only when we say appear, then they all appear, because some people are then just looking at, a specific person, what are they writing, and then writing something similar. So they're not, causing any sort of conflict. So maybe there's an idea there. Hopefully they take my feature request.
Oh, that's a great example, because how many times have you put post-it on the wall and you get the person who wrote it or someone else actually to speak to it? Yeah. And then you think that you know what it says, but no, it's something different. So it's so important to have your input.
I've got a few questions here. So one is, let me just read it. Have you ever experienced a situation where senior leadership felt that it wasn't important to conduct user interviews or testing because your client-facing teams were already interfacing with the customer and they should be the source of knowledge?
Yes. 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 So that's a difficult scenario around, I guess, as a product team and as a product manager, you need to be as close to the users as possible. And when there's that sort of curtain drawn on you, as like we have a customer service team, they understand our customers, it's their job, go and speak to them. I mean, that's something that you have to try and work around. You have to try and bring your talents and skills to the conversation, and often it could be the other angle would be the sales, having salespeople coming towards you with an idea about what the customer wants, and yeah, that's great because you want to know why people buy. But a sales conversation is completely different to a discovery conversation. So I think you have to take the input from the customer service. You definitely have to hear what they've got to say, because that's extremely important, especially if they're dealing with angry customers. You have to listen to the salespeople. That's a valuable input. They're all valuable inputs, but you have to make sure you get your own input to balance it all.
Daniela, did you have something to add? Or?
Considering I just showed a prime example of the problems of Zoom and cut out, I'm afraid, hear the question. I just heard half of Glenn's answer, so I might.
Yeah, it's fine. The question was really just about any situation where you've found that senior leadership didn't think it was important to conduct user interviews or testing because they felt that their client-facing teams should be the source of knowledge.
I feel like you may have, I don't know whether you've worked in the same companies that I have, because you've just hit the nail on the head of one of the prime issues that I've had previously. Yes, I have come across this problem. I can give you like a really basic example actually of the account management. So we had this issue where NPS was, I don't want to mention the company just in case, but NPS, the NPS score was the top score you could get. And I was thinking, well, how are we going to improve their experience if their score is at the top it possibly could be? And then I discovered, that the account managers run the survey. They ask face to face. And I was like, but that's like basically me, being in front of somebody that I manage, asking them if they enjoy working with me and holding a paycheck in front of them, right? It's like, you're not going to get the right answers. And so, yes, I've absolutely worked in this environment because in a sense, they feel threatened that you're going to take away their closeness. How to deal with it? Sometimes you've just got to ask for forgiveness. So, in these situations, I started off just going to events, asking the other teams if I could go on site and join, the sales conversations, the support conversations, going with some of the account managers to their meetings. And eventually kind of that guerrilla style approach started to break down the barriers because they started to understand the value that I was adding, because I was getting closer and closer to the stakeholders who were keeping me at arm's length.
Yeah, I've definitely encountered this situation myself, and sometimes I think we spoke about it at a previous meetup. I think our last one actually, where we just talked about sometimes the relationship and who feels they own the relationship with the customer, and sometimes it starts there. Like, if there is a sales lead and the salesperson feels as though they own that relationship, then it makes it a little bit more difficult for the product manager. But if they can see the value in what the product manager is going to bring, like they're going to understand their problems, they're going to really facilitate, they're going to empathize with the customer, they're going to try and really drive out those problems. So it's actually going to make selling easier in the future, then maybe they'd be brought in and bring you into conversations. And yeah, there's lots around that.
This is the teamwork aspect of it. I mean,
Completely.
you've got to just get that buy-in for the team.
I want to switch.
A good way that oh, sorry, my internet's a bit slow there.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say a good example of like when this can really work is doing prioritization sessions, bringing your stakeholders into those, and as well, if you can, bringing some of your customers in. It's a really good opportunity to make those stakeholders really face the problems that they're seeing, because I think sometimes they fear you're going to use the data against them. So it's like a negotiation. It's part of what we do, right? Like, we'll give you this, but you have to let us talk to the customers and understand what it is they actually want for this. So it's a good way.
Yeah, really good point. I've probably got one last question, and it's really about data. And you guys have both mentioned, ego, and you've both mentioned data. And I want to ask you, and maybe start with you, Daniela. You're at a startup, and you'll obviously be tracking data on how things are, adoption and usage and session times and whatever else you're tracking. How do you know when you have enough data? And especially early on, like if it's really early on, how do you not get discouraged or derailed by the data that you're getting? Yeah.
A really good question, and it's really, really difficult, because if you think about, in a big business, you do an A/B test and you see a 0.5% difference, right, in uptake from changing that CTA, for example. And that represents, at BT, it was what we had like 1 million people log onto their account monthly, maybe even weekly. So that 0.5% is, huge. Right? It's 5,000 or whatever customers. You go to a startup, and especially a startup in COVID, where you maybe have 5 customers a week, right? Suddenly, 0.5% is like, I don't know, 2 hairs on a customer's head. It's not enough to tell you that it's something to do. So you need to, so first of all, I would say it's that classic thing of like, small again. So do your A/B tests, but if you're not seeing significant, difference in that uptake, then leave that one for later and try something else, and try cheaper techniques. I love a red door. I don't know if you've used this one, but it's like where you present. So it's like where you present that you might have a feature that you don't have yet, and they click on it to see more information about it, and you're like, it's coming, or try this, it might also help you. And that's the kind of thing that will help you understand whether there's an intent there. So it's doing small things, but you have to definitely focus more. And they always say, like, let 1,000 flowers bloom, but you don't have the capacity to let 1,000 flowers bloom. You can manage about 10. So yeah.
I'd add, don't drown in data. Don't, if you're at a point where it's stopping you moving forward, and like what Daniela's presentation was all about, safe and stupid. Well, it's stupid not to do anything, and it's stupid not playing it too safe. Like, you've got to take a risk. I don't care what the data is. It's never going to be 100% correct. So you're always going to be taking some amount of risk, and you've got to understand that. And your stakeholders have to understand that. Nothing's certain. You could release anything, you could have done all your research, it still could fail. The best thing to do is get that out there. So don't drown in data.
Thank you. I think we've run out of time. Steve has also addressed my feature request, in that he said that there's a tool called Fun Retro, which you can use post-it notes, and you can hide the results and reveal them afterwards. So if you want to test that out, it's called Fun Retro. I've really enjoyed our conversation today, and I thank you both, Glenn and Daniela, for joining us. I've taken a note down here that I'm going to use a lot, and that's that safe is fall behind and stupid is fall apart. And I really love that. So we're gonna make sure that we straddle that line in between and balance. Really enjoyed our time today. Thanks, Sammy, also once again, mate. Great job. And we'll see you guys in 2 weeks. See you later.
Thanks for having us. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys. This will go up on YouTube. I'll put this up some point next week.
Sounds good, mate.
All right. Have a good weekend, everybody.
See you, mate.
You too. Bye.
Bye.